Approval of resolution of intent pertaining to the election being held on November 8, 2016, for the purpose of submitting to the voters a measure to adopt a transactions and use sales tax to fund and maintain essential public safety services.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Eric Fleming, County Administrator. As your board is aware, public safety is a top priority, not only for your board but the public. And for years, we have had challenges in fully funding positions in the Sheriff's Department, for example. I can't even think of a time when we've carried any less than 10 deputy positions unfunded and vacant. And then in the Fire Department, we have one of the lowest staffing ratios in the state of California. We also have one of the longest standing agreements, so that's why I think we've been able to get by with that. But what we've been faced with is even more of a challenge in that we haven't been able to address some of those deficiencies because of the recent fiscal crisis. And so we're still regaining our footing from that. So what your board last year had expressed a specific interest in looking at new ways to fund sheriff and fire services. One of the concepts that was discussed was a dedicated public safety tax. Last year, an ad hoc committee was formed. 2 supervisors, the sheriff, the fire department, administration, county council met a number of times. We also were joined by someone who is an expert in this area, who had worked on our transportation Measure T. And then also we have been consulting with a member of our community who is very familiar with these issues as well. In addition, your board received presentations from the Sheriff Department and the Fire Department on how they might use additional funds that would be generated from a dedicated public safety tax. And again, I want to emphasize that what is being discussed in concept, at least, is a dedicated public safety tax that would go specifically to the Sheriff Department and the Fire Department in some ratio that may change over time. Those things haven't been solidified. This tax would not replace existing general fund that are going to finance either of these departments. And today's request, before we got too far down the road in planning discussions with the ad hoc committee or taking up time of consultants, we wanted to seek your board's direction. And the resolution that's before you today just supports us continuing to explore this dedicated public safety tax. This isn't a resolution that places a measure on the ballot. That would be coming in the future if your board chooses to want to proceed in this direction. In the near future, next steps, if you direct us to do so today, we'd come back to your board with a contract with a consultant to provide services such as financial research, community outreach, opinion research, and expenditure plans for both the sheriff and fire department. Fiscal impact-wise, professional services are, I think, going to be required in order for this ballot measure to be successful if your board wants to proceed in that direction. And from some preliminary estimates, these types of services could be in the neighborhood of $200,000 or so. We think there may be an opportunity to get some funding from sources, but at the end of the day, I think there is going to have to be some commitment from the general fund to go towards this education and outreach piece, and more specifically, it would come out of the general fund reserve. So we have some folks in the audience today. We have Georgina Vivian, who has helped us out a bit and given us some advice as we've gone. She worked successfully on the Measure T, transportation measure. And then we also have William Ritchie, and he is a resident of Madera County who has attended a number of our town halls and has been very helpful in informing the public about our current situation. So they're here today as well, and I'm available if you have any questions. Paul?
Yeah, I just can't tell you how important this is. In fact, I got a letter from a lady today, actually, saying that she'd been dropped by 2 different insurance companies and whatever she could do to help us. And I don't know who she is, Kathleen Teeter. I don't even know where she lives. But this is so important, and I'd really like to have Bill come up and just give a little history so the public knows and it's on record. He has been such a help on this, and it's just It's just something that we got to let the people make that decision whether they want to do this or not. It's not our decision is just to give it to the public and let them make that decision. And that's the main thing that we as supervisors should be doing. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and county staff, and members of the public. My name is Bill Ritchie. I reside in Raymond. 35 years background in pre-hospital emergency care and hospital-based emergency and trauma care, most here in the San Joaquin Valley, Fresno, Madera counties. Most of you know I've spent a lot of months involved in advocacy in something I feel very strong about from my personal experiences. I've attended a number of town hall meetings. I've met with a lot of the paid call firefighters. I've met with a lot of the CAL FIRE staff and spoken at some service clubs. And as expected, this fire season that we just concluded was of disaster proportion. It could have been worse. And the response to that disaster, county resources, particularly from volunteer engines and water tenders, were heavily involved in state resource area and Forest Service area fires. When this coverage and these incidents occur, that means remaining volunteer companies at times had difficulties in responding to calls. The call out for engine companies at times from volunteers does go unanswered. With greater frequency, call outs for water tenders go unanswered. There have been several times where I've been concerned as a mountain resident where the state engine located at Raymond and the county staff volunteer engine located in Raymond has been dispatched for coverage or to incidents in the valley area. Either when really sometimes what is not a major incident but becomes a major incident because of the lack of adequate staffing of these engines. More resources are pulled and displaced. The justification that brought this discussion up was the ISO and insurance premium crisis. And, of course, the policies in some of the, of course, when we talk about low ISO rating, that's the bigger number. But many people that have been rated 10s, their policies are thousands of dollars. And in some cases, they can't be written. If this trend continues, I see where it could negatively impact real estate values. It could be a deterrent, I believe, to commercial development in this county. But besides ISO as being the opening issue to bring this to discussion, there are really about 4 or 5 other issues that are just as important, if not more. I said to this board at the April 28th meeting that firefighter safety, both of the paid professional and paid call staff, is at risk when there's just a single firefighter responding to a call. Of course, to attack a fire, they need to have 2 on the inside and 2 on the outside. 2 on the outside to be able to rescue firefighters that go in for search and rescue or an interior attack. We have a need, as you know, for additional fire equipment. Much of the county's fleet is aged. Its reliability, it's much more intense for maintenance and repairs. When the equipment starts to get 25 to 30 years old, the safety and reliability of that equipment becomes a problem. The paid call firefighters in this county feel sometimes, they voice to me, as second-class firefighters because often they receive the oldest and most obsolete equipment to perform what is really a frontline service. CAL FIRE has said, and this board has said, the county will always rely on paid call firefighters. And we have a dwindling number of paid call firefighters in this county. It's aging. Although there might be 175 people on the books, the actual numbers of active paid call firefighters that struggle to keep the responses up, from what I hear from PCFs, is more like 50 active PCFs that routinely respond to calls. I believe compensation and incentives for paid call firefighters has been long neglected. It might not solve the recruiting and retention problem, But the paid call firefighters are now at minimum wage as of January 1st. Still, their training is uncompensated. The response to emergency medical and rescue calls like that, which comprise 70 to 80%, they're not compensated for. And any solution that's proposed for this problem, I will say what's politically incorrect, but there is a schism that exists between the paid call staff and the professional staff. And there's going to have to be an effort, I believe, by this board to bridge that gap and provide the resources to the paid call firefighters so they feel valued and part of this team if we're going to rely on them. Finally, I want to address the risk, the property loss risk, and the loss of life risk due to prolonged response and inadequate staffing. This is really the most critical issue. I mentioned several times the Bonneville Rancho incident in 2014 where there was a water tender delay. Those kinds of delays still happen. In contrast, an example of the system that works well, just a few months ago in North Fork, there was a man riding his bicycle and collapsed. And due to the close proximity of firefighters that could get there in a short amount of time with an AED and defibrillate him, in 3 days he's out of the hospital and back to a full productive life. The attempt to measure loss of life in dollars, although people have tried to do it, is not really the issue because the loss of life in personal loss and grief is immeasurable. When you look at this last fire season, the Chowchilla area in particular is the most understaffed in the county, city and county. Fire departments. There's an over-reliance on volunteer personnel, long response times, and of course you know the city of Chowchilla lost a water tender backing up the county on a county fire this summer. The solution is really the county needs to build the fire department, both staff and capital investment. The proper answer would have been 40 to 50 years ago that a fire district should have been established. But right now, under the current funding mechanisms that I see in the budget, because I read that document all the time, I know how much difficulty it is for staff and you folks to balance it. But the current revenue, I don't believe, will grow fast enough to make the deficiencies go away. I believe that a dedicated funding mechanism is needed now to place the county in a better position to accommodate the growth and development that we're experiencing and anticipate, particularly on the Highway 41 corridor in the mountain area. I want to emphasize, I believe this is an issue where the voters should be given the opportunity to decide whether or not to address if they want a tax. If they have the opportunity to decide, then I feel that this board has met its obligation to put that question before them and educate them as to the deficiencies and the possible solution. I believe the board does have a responsibility as our elected representatives to evaluate, assess, and make recommendations in education available to the public. I do not believe no is a solution to this problem. So I ask you today, respectfully, to support moving forward with this resolution and a feasibility study. Final comment that I would have is even as much as we need this effort, I believe the November 2016 ballot could be very difficult in achieving the task that should be completed before a successful campaign could be mounted. That's only 9 months away. And after any monies would be allocated for the feasibility study, then there would be the need to raise campaign funds to wage a successful campaign. Finally, the State Legislative Analyst's Office issued a report about a year ago. The timing of special tax measures is presented to local voters, whether it's on a general election or a non-general election, significantly affects the success of such a measure put before voters. And they report the figures that a general election successful ballot measure for special tax is approximately 49% success for public safety. And on a non-special election ballot, it approaches 59%. And 59% is about 20% more than 49%. I believe it would be easy to get a majority vote. I believe it will be a challenge, particularly on a general election, to get a 67% vote. Thank you for allowing me to share my comments and interest in this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brett?
Thank you for your words. I'm not going to speak to the necessity of the tax and what it means to our public safety entities. I think that was detailed very well by you, and we've discussed it at length here. I want to thank this board for placing me on this ad hoc committee. This is the purest form of taxation with representation. It is putting it on to a ballot measure. Looking at this and looking at what the measure is going to say, I take with grave responsibility, making sure that it's written so that these taxes don't go to anything other than the funding of public safety, that what the voters said they would want to have or not want to have spent on it. Just getting it onto the ballot is the first step. It's getting the education out there and making sure that what the voters voted on is actually where it goes to, and making sure that it doesn't backfill other general fund items, making sure that the general fund continues to support public safety the way it has in the past, that these are just new monies that will go to fund only public safety, not blowing up a budget of administrative costs and everything like that. That's where we have more control here at the local level as a conservative board versus at the state or federal level when tax is levied without a vote of the people, and then that money is taken and put wherever they want to in their general fund.
Whenever they want to.
Whenever they want to. I mean, we're looking at the gas tax right now, and they won't even agree to say that they won't take that and use it for different purposes down the road other than the infrastructure that it's supposed to pay for. Here, I won't support a measure going forward that doesn't keep it only where the voters say it should go. So I thank you for tasking me with that ability to be a watchdog on this. So, but we need to move forward and have that education that goes out to the public.
Yeah, just one last statement, which I didn't say at first, and Bill brought it up, is that I want to really stress that we want to take some of this money to help our volunteer firemen for their uniform, for their training, and more pay for when they do this. I want them to be paid for every time they go out, whether it's a fire and or accident. So I just think it's so important. So to get more people, that's when we're going to get young people. They can't afford to do to do the training stuff they have to now. So you bring it to the public, and I'm ready to make a motion.
Anybody else have any comment? I'd like to make a comment. We're voting on something to basically hire a consultant, correct, to look at this. Is the CDF and the Sheriff Department, do they have any money for consultants? So we're asking the taxpayers to hire a consultant to tax them. That's what we're doing with the general fund money. And so anyway, I just want to make sure that everybody has a little piece of this, and I don't know if I know the Sheriff Department does hire consultants. I know the CDF does hire consultants. A three-way split or something like that. Can that be looked at? Or
Mr. Chairman, this particular budget item isn't budgeted in either of those budgets or administration.
Yeah.
It would all be general fund dollars, so I guess, it probably wouldn't really matter where it's coming from. It's general fund, and it's going to have to originate from contingency. So I was
really disappointed to hear that the city backed out on on their side of it, and I understand why. But that would have given more voters and more openness. So the only thing that we'll be asking is basically taxpayers to vote on a tax on fire. I haven't heard anything from the sheriff department at the last two meetings why they need this tax. But anyway, I know you guys have in the Have Hawk committees. But I'm really disappointed that we didn't have the city support, and I think we do. We don't have Chowchilla support, or
No, and it wasn't so much that we didn't have their support. It was that
Right.
the needs were so very different between what the city needed and what the county needed.
Two needs
so
are totally
the
different.
basically this will be District 1, District 1, District 2, and 5.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I just wanted to clarify a point that we've talked about within the ad hoc committee. The county itself, we couldn't fund the campaign. That would have to be done privately or through the CAL FIRE union or the Deputy Sheriff's Association union. The only thing that we could fund would be the education portion of it to let people know what the measure was, and that's
Right.
it. Right? Is that because as soon as if we were putting money into a campaign, this isn't to say vote for it or not vote for it. Our portion of it would just be to say this is what it is, so that you know what you're voting on, and that would be the portion that we could do. If that's correct.
That's correct, Supervisor Frazier. What we would come back with is the financial research that would then lead to an expenditure plan, a well-defined expenditure plan, and then doing the community outreach and education, also getting the opinion of the public as well as a piece of that. So.
Yeah, there would be. Yeah, I forgot that. There's a polling portion of it. So at the front end, if we go out and poll and they're saying 20% favor, we know right then what our yeah.
Okay. Anything else from the public before I bring it back to the board? Thank you, Becky.
Thank you. Good morning. Still morning. Rebecca Martinez, Clerk Recorder, Registrar of Voters. My only concern is the timing. In the resolution, it states that the matter would be brought back on or before August the 2nd, which really cuts it close to the legal deadline for putting something on the ballot. Our preference is to have all of the materials to us, which would include the tax rate statement, the impartial analysis, and perhaps the fiscal impact statement by July the 6th, which is E-minus 125. We could probably still work with it shortly after July the 6th, but there's a lot to be done by way of publications, getting the things translated. The printing deadlines is big because what it does is if we have to wait for a while to get the resolutions and things of that sort, it pushes Madera County's printing schedule back. So then it forces us to put out materials that are not timely. So those are my only concerns, is just the timing of it.
We can change those dates. I mean, that's.
Ms. Martinez brings up a very good point, and I think that was put in just to let everyone know that that's kind of the drop-dead date. But we would definitely want to take that into consideration, that everything needs to be there earlier. And as a matter of fact, we would immediately, whether it's the next meeting or the following meeting, we'd have the consultant agreement back before your board. That's the first thing we need to do, and get some direction on that and get moving forward so we can get all these pieces and meet the deadline if it's July or whatever it needs to be there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Becky.
Okay, thank you.
Max?
The chairman stated something about it's unfortunate the city pulled out, but you know what? Indirectly, probably the best thing could happen.
Yeah.
You have a lot of people live in the city of Madera, and they just don't see the urgency of this matter, and they would probably vote no on it.
I think so too.
So, and the people that live up in the rural areas or up in the mountains, the foothills and all that, they see firsthand what can happen. So I see it as a win-win situation. I mean, they saw what happened last summer, and what can happen again. So for them to vote against this project would be to cut their nose off. You know, that you got to vote for it because they see their insurance rates go up, and then many times it disappears. The companies don't want to insure properties up there because it's a loss situation. I used to sell insurance before, and anytime a house is more than 5 miles away from a fire station, it's a total loss. It is a total loss. That's what the industry sees. That they don't want to insure losses. So, I myself, I live in the city, but I totally support when we vote for it in the city. I'll vote for it. You know, you have to pay. I mean, you got to pay for these services, and we're negligent right now. We just don't have enough people out there to
Well,
help us when we need them.
earlier I mentioned, you know, when we were talking about the fire and the fires up there and stuff, and to me this is a government-caused issue, and the government should be paying basically the CDF and our sheriff department because of the issues that we have with fire and safety. I mean, this is all the way from federal government to state government, the issues that we are having right now up there. And that's why
Rick, you know, when you...
No, I'm just saying, it's just the bark beetle and all that stuff and everything else. And I hate to put a more burden on the taxpayer because it's actually the government that caused them to have to vote for this tax in a county. It's just absolutely, and I agree, and I agree with it. And we've been through the volunteer program 3 years ago, and we saw where that got us. But anyway, I just want to make that clear the way I'm thinking about it.
Well, Rick, you know, you got to think. You know, we were debating this, talking about it a few moments ago about previous administrators or people that work for the county not doing their job. That's why we got into bad situations, and this board is trying to rectify some of these problems. Same thing here. You know, what happens in the past, we got to just let it go and try to improve the situation as it stands now. We can't keep repeating they should have done this, government should have done that. Let's get together and take care of these problems that are having. It's going to cost money. It's not cheap. It's not going to cheap.
That's not my point. The point is we are taxing the Madera County people for their own protection because our government has failed us. I'm sorry, period. All right. Paul?
That's true. But the thing is that two things is that what people are paying now for their insurance is extravagant compared to this tax rate. I mean, it's not even. I mean, this little bit of you might pay $100 a year in this tax, but they're paying thousands of dollars in insurance if they can get it. This lady got to cancel twice. And it's happened that all over. Allstate will not.
You got $150 whack.
Plus, the $150 for the SRA fees. And then Chowchilla's got the same thing. This is not just up there. They're 10 rated too, ISO, because their fire station is not fully manned. So this is not just the mountains. It's for the whole county.
I agree.
So
I agree.
I have one more.
Okay, let's.
I haven't talked at all yet.
We just look at MCTC, which is the same kind of a measure. You know, we tout that as, you know, we're a self-help county where we weren't getting things from the state because the state wasn't doing it. We did it for ourselves, and that went in front of the voters, and that has to be. Again, this is taxation with representation. We're not able to levy a tax, nor will we. It has to be, the voters have to say yes at a pretty high rate.
Dave?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm not proposing a tax on anybody. We're allowing the voters to make that decision themselves.
Exactly.
And here, as a taxpayer myself, person who buys a lot of stuff in Madera County, I want to remind everybody that I pay property taxes. I buy stuff in Madera County too, and I employ people in Madera County. And the reality is this: when I pay my insurance bill, I get sick to my stomach because my insurance bill is like $2,000, $2,500 a year on my house. It's getting to where it is at parity with my house payment. And the reality is that the ISO ratings directly affect that. The ISO ratings are directly affected by the fact that we don't have adequately staffed fire department.
That's right.
And the same is true of your liability policy when it comes to sheriff and police. the theft and loss. The same is true there. The ISO ratings are also affecting that. So we have to ask ourselves the question as voters, as taxpayers,
And leaders.
will this sales tax, and I would not be in favor of a property tax, but a sales tax is a little bit different animal to me. Will this sales tax, if levied by the voters upon ourselves, will it offset the amount of money that I'm paying in insurance in the end? I believe the answer to that question is yes. I'm not saying I support the measure. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying we ought to give the opportunity to explore this.
I make a motion, we approve moving forward on this and work out the dates that works best with Becky on our timing on that so we don't mess that up.
Second. We have a first by Tom, a second by Max. Can I have the vote?
Supervisor Wheeler?
Yes.
Supervisor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Supervisor Rogers?
Yes.
Supervisor Frazier?
Yes.
Supervisor Farinelli?
Yes.
Vote passes 5-0.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, let's go to lunch and come back at 1:30.
Thank you, Rick.